books, along with mentors, putting myself in challenging situations and trying to take massive action, I would say reading really good business and money books has been one of the key pillars to helping me to become more successful in life. According to research by the OECD, those countries around the world that have a higher literacy proficiency rate tend to have higher per capita income rates also. So it really does pay to be a reader. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 of the best business and money books that I've read that have really helped transform my life, and I hope that they can help you too. So here goes. Number 1, The Negotiation Book by Steve Gates. Now, for those of you who don't know Steve Gates is the founder and former CEO of the Gap Partnership. The Gap Partnership is a consultancy based here in the UK, but now has offices around the world, and they specialize in one thing for their clients, and that is training them to be better negotiators. And they deal with Fortune 500 companies all the way down to small businesses and individuals as well. Now, a small disclaimer, I went on the Gap Partnership's flagship course, The Complete Skilled Negotiator, back in 2017. And I can honestly say it was a fantastic 3 to 4 day experience, and I really learned a lot about how to be a better negotiator. And what the negotiation book does by Steve Gates is really teach you a core principle, and that is that negotiation is a process. It helps you take often the emotion out of the negotiating process, and it treats it as such. And there are lots of fantastic tools, tips, hacks along the way, as well as real life case studies in different situations, which really takes the book away from the theoretical and into the practical. Now, one of the key concepts within the book is what's called the negotiation clock face. So if you imagine a clock face with 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, all the way back round to 6 o'clock, and then again back up to 12, and split that into sections, what the book does is really teach that everything from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock and the methods contained within that is what we call hard bargaining situations that you may face in negotiation. So for example, if you're negotiating the price of a used or a new car at a car forecourt with a car salesman, the issue is really about price. You're trying to buy the car for the lowest possible price, and the salesman's obviously trying to sell it for the highest price. And you may have other things in there like insurance or servicing or fuel, etc., or colours and that sort of thing. But ultimately it's about price. You're trying to obviously push the price down as much as you can, and the salesman's trying to get the highest price so they can get their commission. Now, that's a really good situation of a hard bargaining situation where it's quite adversarial, it's quite transactional, and ultimately you can be quite tough in your negotiations there because you're unlikely to have a future relationship with your counterparty. The same applies if you're on holiday and you go to street vendors and you're negotiating the price of an ornament that you may want to take home. Then if you go back to the clock face and look at 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, those are situations that the book discusses, which is really about problem solving type negotiations. So these are more complex, much more variables that need to be traded, and ultimately there is likely to be a relationship after the initial negotiation that needs to be maintained. So these negotiations tend to be less adversarial, less transactional, and more about bringing parties together to trade off what's acceptable to each and come to an overall agreement. And he said, in essence, grow the pie rather than split up an existing pie and, see if an agreement can be reached. And that negotiation clock face concept really opened my eyes to the possibilities that you may face within the real world. So now when I'm out in situations, I often look at and try and see where I am on the clock face. So it's been a fantastic book. I highly recommend it if you're really interested in becoming a better negotiator, and it's worth checking out. Book number 2, The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman. Now, Josh Kaufman is an acclaimed author, business strategist, and skills acquisition expert, and this is a fantastic book. It's quite a big book, probably about 400 or 500 pages long, but in essence, what it does is it tries to condense what might be a really top level school MBA into a book. So if you imagine you're doing your MBA, at a Harvard or a Princeton or maybe the London Business School. Ultimately, this book is about condensing what you may learn into a book. Now, it is obviously higher level than what you might expect in a 2-year MBA course, but the concepts that it covers are broadly the same. So really what the book goes into is the essence and functionings of what makes a successful business. So think about the core functions in a business: marketing, finance, sales, operations, leadership, etc. And it breaks those down and dedicates a couple of pages to each topic, so you can really get a good high-level view of a particular facet of a business, get a really good understanding, and then without it droning on and going too deep, it moves on. So by the end of the book, you end up with a really broad overview of how a business works, what are the key things that make a business successful, what are some of the failings, and you can really learn from that. And I think, as the book says, it really is an MBA in a book. It's a fantastic read, and I, again, thoroughly recommend it. So book number 3, Losing My Virginity by Sir Richard Branson. Now, a best-selling business book list would not be complete without a reference to the eponymous Virgin founder, Sir Richard Branson. And a personal story, really. This is the book that really got me broader into business books. I was traveling around the world, and I think I was in Southeast Asia at the time, and I took this book with me in my backpack, and I was expecting to spend maybe dipping in and out over the course of the weeks and months. As soon as I opened the book, I couldn't put it down for 4 days, and I finished the book. It was a fantastic read, and it really talks about Sir Richard Branson's life from when he was 2 years old, from what he first remembers about his life living with his parents in England, all the way up to, I think, the year 1998 when the book was released, and all of his trials and tribulations of building the Virgin Empire, Virgin Records, the launch of the Virgin Atlantic airline, trying to take on Coca-Cola with Virgin Cola and failing miserably. And it's a fantastic book because it talks about the difficulties of really building a business, dealing with people, dealing with banks. He almost was foreclosed on a number of times, and he talks about the experiences there. It really is a roller coaster and quite an amazing life that he's had. There's been a follow-up since, which is Finding My Virginity, which talks about his more recent endeavours into space travel with Virgin Galactic and other endeavours as well. But I highly recommend this book if you're just interested in learning about a very exciting individual who's also not only built a big business group, but has also done many interesting adventures in his hot air balloon and stunts and the like as well. So a fantastic read, and I highly recommend it. Book number 4 is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. So Ben Horowitz is one half of Andreessen Horowitz, now known as A16Z, which is one of the world's most famous and successful Silicon Valley-based venture capital funds. And they've invested as early-stage investors in companies like Meta, Facebook, Airbnb, and Twitter as well. Ben Horowitz in this book really talks about what it means to be a startup and scale-up founder, and the real challenges of doing that, because not only is he a venture capitalist and an investor, he's also been on the other side and actually run companies and built them day to day. And he really talks in this book about the challenges of doing that, dealing with product issues and product teams, building teams, hiring and firing talent, raising money, keeping investors happy, dealing with really tough competition, changes in the market, etc. And it's a real warts and all book. It shows that entrepreneurship really isn't for the faint of heart, but it's a fantastic journey if you're prepared to be resilient and be tough and really work your way through the challenges as they arise, because they will arise. But another really great book about what it takes to be, a founder of a business and to grow a business. And then my final book recommendation. So book number 5 is Winning Now, Winning Later by David M. Cote. So David Cote led the industrial giant Honeywell very successfully for about 14 years as its former chairman and CEO. Prior to that, he was actually at General Electric under the lauded CEO at the time, Jack Welch. And David Cote was actually seen as a potential successor to Jack Welch when Jack Welch eventually was going to step down. He ultimately was told that he wasn't going to get the job, so he left and ultimately got the role with Honeywell. And what's really interesting is when he took over Honeywell, they were a struggling industrial company, had a market cap on the stock exchange of about $20 billion, but there were lots of issues with accounting, with people, with the businesses they were in. And over the course of 14 years, he successfully turned the company around and really made them successful and turned them into a $120 billion market cap company. So he appreciated the share price by 6 times over the period, and that outperformed the benchmark S&P 500 index by about 2.5, 3 times. So it's a really good stock to obviously hold during his leadership. What's great about this book actually is that David Cote really challenges the notion that you can't do 2 diametrically opposite things in business at the same time. He thinks that's complete baloney, and actually he gives lots of examples where he did challenge his teams to really do that. So for example, some of the things that he said he would hear during his initial days at Honeywell: oh, you can't give great customer service to your customers and hold really low inventory and stock levels at the same time. You have to have a lot of stock to be able to look after your customers. And he challenged that notion completely. Or you can't cut costs and be really efficient in your operations and yet grow significantly your top line and your revenue and your profits at the same time. Again, he completely challenged that notion and made Honeywell very, very successful. The other concept that he introduces is, because Honeywell is a public company and has to report its earnings quarterly to the stock market, he had to do things that were quite short term to make sure he effectively could make his numbers and be successful at doing that. But at the same time, he was very, very clear about holding some back and some of those profits back to invest in what were ultimately long-term bets that may take 5, 10, 15 years to pay off. And he said by doing that, by planting seeds into things that had a longer term payoff, you almost guaranteed the future success of your organization whilst meeting the short term earnings pressures that you had. It's a really, really interesting book, very insightful about what it takes to run a successful business, but take a short-term and long-term view at the same time. So there you have it. There's 5 of the best business and money books that I can recommend that have certainly helped me during my career. If you've got any other recommendations, I love reading. Please do put them in the comments. I'd love to hear more and read more of some of your recommendations. Don't forget to subscribe, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.